welcome today for this forum on why and which manufacturing matters. So first of all, I just want to thank my colleagues, Mark Miro and Howard Weil, for their leadership and their scholarship on this important topic, which has brought us to today. The timing of this forum could not be more propitious. The severity of the recession, the sluggishness of the recovery are triggering a robust and, frankly, a long overdue debate in the country about the future of manufacturing. It's happening, obviously, not only in op-eds and blogs and editorials from some of the most eminent economists in the country. Christina Romer and Laura Tyson recently had pieces in the New York Times. Jared Bernstein had a blog earlier this week. But we also have Rob and Howard and Sue and other folks here today. But also we have CEOs of major global production companies. Jeff Immelt of GE, Andrew Liveris of Dow Chemical, Boeing. They've been particularly forceful in articulating the need for national manufacturing policy to build off the strong base we already have in the United States. So three things I want to highlight at the beginning. As you will hear today, there's a lot at stake in this debate as the U.S. struggles to not just create more jobs, but better jobs, and retool our economy in the aftermath of the recession. As Howard and Sue Helper will demonstrate, manufacturing is a special sector because it delivers quality jobs, fuels innovation, drives exports, reduces the trade deficit, enables the United States to be at the vanguard of the clean tech revolution. A country that produces more innovates more. A country that produces less, frankly, should worry about its long-term prospects. Second, it is essential post-recession that the U.S. develops and implements a national manufacturing strategy. I use the word national rather than federal deliberately because all levels of government play critical roles in supporting, buttressing, leveraging manufacturing. The federal role is obvious. Given the impact of trade, tax, and currency levels on manufacturing, and given the range of federal government investments in innovation, human capital, and infrastructure. But the states have broad powers over such market-shaping policy areas as infrastructure, innovation, energy, education, and skills training. And cities and metro areas are critical because they house the institutions that actually do the work. Manufacturing firms, large and small, trade associations, our air, rail, and seaports, advanced research institutions, community colleges, high schools that provide career and technical services, so forth and so on. Manufacturing strategy is a federalist act done in close collaboration with the private sector and supporting civic institutions, and the presence of Connect today is a testament to the profound role that's played by local, metropolitan, and regional intermediaries. And finally, this is the first in a series of forums and reports on manufacturing that Brookings Metro intends to hold this spring and summer. Tomorrow, I'll be in Michigan for the release of a state urban and metropolitan strategy that capitalizes on the manufacturing assets of that state as a platform for future growth and renewal. On March 8th, back in this room, we'll release our report called Export Nation, which will reveal how manufacturing is driving metropolitan and national growth post-recession. On May 3rd, Howard will return with the spatial geography of manufacturing, which will unveil the concentration of the nation's productive assets, very distinct productive assets, in different metros around the country. And then in a series of forums as part of a Global Cities initiative, we will look at the links between manufacturing, exports, and skilled workers in LA in March, Ohio in May, and Florida in June. We're also embarking with McKinsey on some very exciting work on drilling down on the full federal, state, and local policy agendas for two advanced industries in two dramatically different states. And that will show the very nature of the federalist task facing two different industries in different places. So in sum, our intent here is to undergird the manufacturing debate and policy action with evidence not only about manufacturing performance, but the distinct manufacturing assets of different metros and their states. And looking forward to the discussion today, Howard and Sue's presentation, the panels to follow. I encourage everyone to engage on Twitter as well with me, Mark Muro, Brookings Metro, hashtag USMFG. Let me start by introducing Peter Cowie to give a few remarks. He's the UC San Diego Dean and Qualcomm Professor of Communications and Technology Policy at the School of International Relations and Pacific Studies. He's the chair of the Connect Innovation Institute, and in 2009 he served as the senior counselor for policy planning to U.S. Trade Representative Ron Kirk. He's been absolutely critical in helping position UCSD as a true metropolitan leader and national model of metropolitan leadership from the university sector on the productive economy, working closely with the private sector from idea generation to tech transfer and commercialization in advanced electronics, medical technology, energy, biopharma, and more. Peter, thanks for coming.
Well, thanks, Bruce, very much for both being a gracious host today to the Connect Innovation Institute project and a wonderful partner in thinking about the future of innovation and production and employment possibilities in the United States. As you hear the discussion unfold today, especially from the participants from the Connect project, I hope that you'll walk away with 4 headlines in your mind. Here's the first headline. The fact that the largest technology organization in Southern California, one of the bastions of high-tech innovation, cared enough about the problem of production and employment in the United States to mount a major project with the support of the founder of Gateway Computers and with the presence of Irwin Jacobs, the co-founder and former CEO of Qualcomm. That in itself is a message that should matter in Washington. Here's the second headline you should think about. The public discussion about innovation in the United States and its implications for growth confuses 2 types of innovation systems that coexist in the American economy. The first type of innovation system is what we call novel product innovation. It's knowledge-intensive, high-value-added innovation. It's Qualcomm's breakthrough chip technologies. It's protease inhibitors. It's nanomaterials. And in that system of innovation, the United States remains the world's best, because of a combination of both entrepreneurial markets and appropriate public policy to support the innovation system. We have to constantly revisit to deal with competitive challenges, but that system is fundamentally sound in its core if we maintain it. The second type of innovation system, however, is incremental product and process innovation. Think of that as an automobile transmission for most of your cars. Fundamentally, that technology is the same as it was 50 years ago at its core, but in terms of its features and productivity, enormously greater because of continuous incremental innovation and process production innovation that makes those features affordable, even as they are added upon. That system of innovation in the United States lags even against other high-wage industrial countries. And that should be a source of concern to the United States. Here's the third headline. Both of those very different types of innovation share the same 4 fundamental building blocks. And we get those building blocks right for novel product innovation, and we don't get them so right for incremental product and process innovation. Let me illustrate the 4 building blocks with the more familiar field of high-tech technology products. Number 1, shared production assets. If you go to San Diego, the smallest startup firm in biotech or electronics, et cetera, can have available to them the most state-of-the-art electron microscopes and mass spectrometers, because within the cluster, anchored by the research university, but with the help of organizations like Connect, there is an efficient system for sharing those key scientific assets so you don't have to buy them to use them in your early stages of growth. Rental, sharing, a whole series of solutions exist to share key production assets. Number 2, there is an effective networking institutional structure. We all know that innovation is about people and ideas, and the circulation of people and ideas while respecting intellectual property. A good innovation cluster encourages that circulation and networking. But it's not just about sharing ideas and sharing people and getting them to move around. It's about building trust and cooperation inside the cluster so that, for lack of a better term, handshake deals are possible at early stages to try things out informally with cooperation among many, leading later to the complex contractual maze that we all have to live through when things scale up. The third feature of a successful innovation system as a building block is the ability to launch innovative business models. What do we mean by that? Think of the iPod. Before the iPod was introduced, the conventional wisdom in the business press was that content was king, and where profit was to be made, hardware was a commodity. Steve Jobs understood that maybe you could invert that proposition. A slick piece of hardware integrated to a new service called a store could make the profit on the hardware and commoditize the content, and thus revolutionize an entire industry. That is an innovative business model, and that is possible due to a combination of public policy, professional services that support innovators, and a larger permissive environment that spawns that type of creative thinking. And the fourth feature of a successful innovation group and cluster is really the ability to have appropriate specialized financial institutions. America reinvented its innovation system in light of the Japanese challenge around small startup companies that eventually became giants like Qualcomm. Those companies were supported by a novel financial system that we called venture capital. But venture capitalists did not drop from God or even from Wall Street. They occurred both in response to a need and in response to public policy innovations, such as the Securities and Exchange Commission saying to pension funds that they could put part of their portfolio into high-risk venture investments through venture capitalists. Those four building blocks we would submit are lagging as a set of building blocks for incremental product and process innovation in America. And here's the fourth headline we hope that you'll walk away with, which is the way we got the novel product innovation system and its policies right was by experimentation at the national, local, state, and regional level. Call them technology clusters that evolved. And the remarkable thing about that is that this policy ecosystem supporting an innovations ecosystem is supported broadly in both blue states and red states. It is not a Democratic or a Republican state administration priority. Go to the Southern Governors Association, they support it. Go to California, California supports it. The same type of approach at a federalist level, combining local initiative with federal support, could help rebuild a bipartisan basis for the innovation system in ecology for incremental product and process innovation. As you hear my panelists today lay out the studies that we've put together, and that includes Sue Helper in her crossover role between the two projects, we are going to be delighted to answer your questions, and we hope contribute to this dialogue that Brookings has been such a trailblazer in. Thank you very much.
Manufacturing policy is the subject of great current controversy. Former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Christina Romer, recently wrote in a New York Times op-ed that a persuasive case for a manufacturing policy remains to be made. Well, today, we'd like to make that case. Our discussion proceeds in three parts. First, we'll review why manufacturing matters. Second, we'll talk about which kinds of manufacturing matters, and in that way we build upon other work that has been done, but we talk about which manufacturing matters because not all manufacturing matters equally. Different firms, with different business strategies, different industries matter differently for the achievement of important national policy goals. And finally, we'll lay out a policy framework for thinking about a national, federal, state, and local integrated manufacturing policy. So, why manufacturing matters? Well, between the beginning of 2001 and the end of 2009, the nation lost nearly 6 million manufacturing jobs. Since December 2009, it's regained somewhat more than 300,000. Now, it's possible that that small increase in the number of manufacturing jobs is just a bounce back of demand from the recession, but we actually think that there's reason to believe that it could be the beginning of something longer lasting. The era of mass offshoring is probably coming to an end. Wages in China are rising faster than productivity. There's been a slight increase in the value of the Chinese yuan. Of course, it's still manipulated, and it shouldn't be, but things have been moving very, very slowly in the right direction. A wide range of manufacturers, including such prominent ones as GE and Ford, are beginning to reconsider the costs as well as the benefits of offshoring, and some companies are bringing work back to the United States. And finally, the current natural gas boom has been boosting demand for products such as chemicals and machinery needed to extract natural gas. So for all those reasons, we think that we could be at the beginning of a manufacturing job renaissance. But we won't be without the right kinds of policy. The bounce back of manufacturing jobs will remain just a trickle without a more robust federal manufacturing policy. And moreover, the recent bounce back of manufacturing jobs has been accompanied by a disturbing decline in manufacturing wages, which has contributed to some extent to the growth of manufacturing jobs recently, but of course at the expense of manufacturing workers and more broadly the nation's standard of living. So manufacturing policy is needed to address the wage problem in manufacturing as well as to spur more robust job growth. Manufacturing matters for several reasons. Manufacturing embodies the virtues of a rebalanced and more productive next economy, where we think the national economy should be going over the course of the next business cycle upswing. Manufacturing offers high-wage jobs, thereby providing opportunity to a wide range of workers. It contributes disproportionately to innovation. It's the key to reducing the trade deficit, thereby creating an economy that is more oriented towards exports and less dependent on imports than our current economy. And finally, it contributes to environmental sustainability, and particularly through the reduction of carbon emissions. Even after controlling for all the worker and job characteristics that influence wages, manufacturing still pays higher wages to workers at a variety of educational levels. It pays about 7% more to workers with just a high school diploma and to workers with at least a bachelor's degree, and a bit more than that to workers with some college. So if you move a worker from another industry to manufacturing on average, that worker will get about a 7% wage increase if they're in one of these educational categories. Manufacturing is the major source of commercial innovation. More than 2/3 of domestic R&D spending by companies happens in manufacturing firms. About 18% of all that spending happens in the pharmaceutical industry. About 10% in transportation equipment, including autos and auto parts, aerospace, shipbuilding, and other areas. And about 14% combined occurs in the computers and electronics area, which includes communications equipment. And moreover, the kinds of incremental product and process innovation that Peter mentioned are also areas in which manufacturing, though in need of improvement, still excels relative to other parts of the economy. It's a common, recently a very commonly repeated myth that innovation in manufacturing is the cause of manufacturing job loss. If you compare the 1990s with the pre-recession part of the first decade of this century, the period 2000 to 2007, you see that annual growth in productivity was about the same in those two periods. But annual job loss in manufacturing was much, much greater in the 2000s than in the 90s. So clearly there's no necessary or no empirical relationship between manufacturing job loss and productivity growth in manufacturing. So don't blame productivity growth for manufacturing job loss. Manufacturing is essential for reducing the trade deficit because nearly 2/3 of all U.S. trade, imports and exports combined, is due to manufacturing. If we're going to reduce imports by bringing work back from other countries and increase exports, manufacturing is going to be a key to doing that. It's not literally impossible to do it without manufacturing, but it's much, much easier to do it with manufacturing, particularly if we want to avoid a very, very large devaluation of the dollar and its consequent results for our standard of living. Manufacturing is a huge contributor to environmental sustainability. My Brookings colleagues last year released a report on the clean economy. Jobs in the clean economy are those that produce goods and services with an environmental benefit or that add value to those goods and services. And my colleagues found that the clean economy is nearly 3 times as manufacturing intensive as the broader U.S. economy. That is, manufacturing accounts for about 3 times the share of jobs in the clean economy as it does in the U.S. economy as a whole. So manufacturing is at the forefront of the development of a low-carbon economy. And that's not only because renewable energy components like solar panels and wind turbines and advanced batteries are manufactured products, but also because a whole range of manufactured products are needed to retrofit buildings to make them less energy using. So which manufacturing matters? The manufacturing sector is quite heterogeneous. We think about which manufacturing matters in 2 parts. Industries matter. Some industries have greater potential to contribute to broad national goals, such as the ones that we've outlined here today, than others do. And firms and their business strategies matter as well. Which kinds of industries are the ones in which the U.S. has the greatest potential to retain or expand jobs? Well, one kind is fairly widely talked about: high-wage manufacturing industries. High-wage industries are either high-tech, high-skill industries, such as pharmaceuticals and computers and electronics, or very capital-intensive industries, such as autos and petroleum and coal products. But we shouldn't also forget about manufacturing industries where transportation costs are an important part of total costs. Those are also industries in which we're likely to retain or expand jobs. Those are industries where products are heavy in relation to their value. Such prosaic industries as wood and paper and food and beverages. In those industries, production has to occur relatively close to consumers. And finally, over the last couple of years, there's been job growth in a variety of middle-wage durable goods manufacturing industries. And as we said before, I think there's reason for that to continue in the future. We point to 4 industries in particular that make particularly large contributions to critical national goals. Chemicals, a category that includes pharmaceuticals; transportation equipment, as we mentioned before, including autos, auto parts, aerospace, shipbuilding, and others; machinery; and computers and electronics, a category that also includes communications equipment and many medical devices. All 4 of those industries pay wages that are above the manufacturing average. We look here on this slide, we see average weekly wages, again controlling for all other factors that influence wages. Those 4 industries are the 4 that contribute the largest shares of commercially funded R&D in the manufacturing sector. 3 of the 4 industries, chemicals, transportation equipment, and machinery, have had a positive change in their trade balance over the course of the last decade. So they've been moving in the right direction, while manufacturing as a whole has not. And finally, transportation equipment, machinery, and computers have been gaining jobs over the last couple of years. And I will now turn the podium over to my co-author, Sue Helper, who will talk about why firms, not just industries, matter.
Great. So Howard has talked to us about kind of why manufacturing matters overall, and that on average manufacturing makes important contributions to national goals in the areas of innovation, wages, the trade deficit, and the clean economy. And then he's gone on to show that particular industries make outsized contributions in these areas. And I want to argue that even within particular industries, certain production models have the opportunity to make these great contributions, even within some of the industries we think of as old industries. So what do I mean by these production strategies? So the distinction I want to talk about is sort of between high road and low road. And so in a high road production strategy, firms are going to, it's basically a win-win-win strategy, where firms are able to create high productivity because they're harnessing the knowledge of all their workers, not just the smart PhDs at the top or MBAs at the top, but everyone. And to that model, a well-trained and thus highly paid workforce is key to generating productivity in a way that I'll show. And so these firms then compete principally on quality and innovation. And that model then contrasts with what we might call a low-road model, where we have companies and supply chains, and basically what they're trying to do is profit by squeezing those below them. And so they're competing rather than by expanding a pie, by shifting costs to others. So a small pie, let's grab my share. It doesn't matter if the way I'm competing is imposing safety costs on workers or environmental costs on communities. I'm going to get my profits. I want to give a particular example within the automotive stamping industry. This is one of a number of industries I could have chosen. So just to stress, that's an example. And this industry, like a number of others, I think, shows the connections between this incremental innovation system and the novel innovation system that Peter started with. So in automotive stamping, firms take pieces of metal and bang on them with huge presses, sometimes the size of this room, to create everything from car doors to, say, metal cup holders. It's an old industry. It's been around for a long time. On the other hand, there's a huge opportunity for innovation here, both on the process side. You go to innovative firms in this area, and you see robots. You see advanced sensors that can tell you what's going on in that press. You see also on the materials side, ability of using high-strength steel, even non-metallic metals to run through this press, and there's discussions of metallurgy at the metallic level that goes on in these industries. And so that's kind of the high road firms. The top 10% in this, some data that I collected with some colleagues at Case Western on the auto supply chain, the top 10% of these firms getting a value added per worker of almost $100,000. The very most recent data where these firms have recovered more from the recession suggests that the top 10% of these firms are more at $150,000 value added per worker. This takes us up to the level of some of what we think of as the really high-tech firms. If we think about what does $150,000 value added per worker mean, well, if you think about sort of paying somebody at a living wage or even a $20 an hour wage, we're talking maybe $40,000, $50,000 there. But if you're making $150,000 per worker, that's plenty of money left over for capital investment for profits. Whereas these low firms, the firms in the bottom 10 percentile, $30,000. Even if you took all that money and paid the worker with it, it's not a great wage. What this slide shows is that those firms, these same firms, so the firm at the $99,000 value added per worker, their production workers are making $17 an hour on average. One thing I should also say is that these workers are likely to be getting benefits that would increase their total compensation a lot, health benefits, retirement benefits, et cetera. Whereas in the low road, they're making $11 an hour. So how is it that we have the same job classification and we have differences of 50%? What is it that these workers do that's different? So one is, if we want to think about how are we going to introduce these new innovations, how are we going to get in high-strength steel that requires new design practices, new ways. The high-strength steel, for example, is thinner and more brittle. It can tear in the press. It can have a problem of what's called springback, where it wants to retain its shape. So groups of workers can form quality circles. This is a Japanese innovation that has been known for 20, 30 years in the US, getting groups of workers, so ranging from the person who's tending this machine, but knows its qualities, its problems, what happens when you actually try to run that piece of metal through that particular press, interacting with skilled tradespeople, engineers, et cetera, solving problems so they can both reduce defects, so they can reduce costs, can also increase revenue by enabling the introduction of higher tech products and introducing those products more quickly. And so as you can see, firms that did this recovered more quickly. This is, again, data from the Case Western survey of automotive suppliers that we conducted last year. Those firms that had these practices saw a small increase in sales. Those that did not are still down almost 10% in sales compared to 2007. A similar process, a practice that kind of links this incremental improvement economy with the ability to innovate, to introduce new products, is preventive maintenance, basically knowing that your machines are going to be up at all times. So firms take different paths to the high road, but I think the advantages are shared by workers and managers and also communities. You may think, well, geez, how can you pay 50% higher wages to your direct labor and make any kind of profit? And a key here is that if you pay 50% higher wages, that doesn't mean your costs go up by 50%. Direct labor is a very small part of total cost in a modern manufacturing system. Supply chains are very important. So the key costs are actually in the supply chain and purchase parts. So 65% is a typical number, is in purchase parts. So if you have a worker who you know is going to make sure there are no defects, make sure that the presses are up and running, that your capital is working for you at all the times, that worker can, in some sense, save you money and is worth far more to you than that small increment in the wage. However, sort of despite these advantages, we often don't see a lot of firms on the high road. Why not? Two reasons. The first one is what economists call complementarities. That certain of these investments don't pay off unless several are made nearly simultaneously. Many of these firms are quite small. So the median firm that responded to our survey is about 100 workers. A quarter of the employment in the auto supply chain is in firms with less than 500 workers. You have a manager there who's, not only the salesperson, but the R&D person and the HR manager. So if you think about problems within a firm, there's a technique called agile production, where you're introducing new products all the time. You can make a great variety of products. There's a firm, Cardinal Fastener, outside of Cleveland, that can ship a UF fastener anywhere within most of the country within 24 hours. They can set up, they can run it. What enables them to do that was simultaneous coordinated investments. So they have the equipment that's flexible, computer controlled. They can change it over quickly. They can market that they actually have this capability, that you can call them up and They will solve your problem for you. The IT that schedules this from their website to the shop floor. But then the HR is also very key. You have workers that don't just watch machines. They set up and run the machines. They make improvements to the future production. You can also see these complementarities within a supply chain. So I mentioned these new materials. This is a really important way that we could be reducing our fuel consumption. Every 10% reduction in the weight of a car can cut fuel consumption between 6 and 8%. But in order to do that, you need to design differently. So for high-strength steel, it's not high strength unless it's stretched. So that means the design has to actually have embosses and various kinds of lines that make sure the steel gets stretched in the press. That means different design practices. It means different tooling. It needs different production processes in the stamping firm. All these are now done by separate firms, and so the coordination needs to happen and is actually problematic right now. A second big issue is externalities, which is the firm owners that are trying to decide to make these investments or not. They don't capture all the benefits. High wages are a big benefit to workers, but that's not captured in the decision-making of a profit-maximizing firm. So moving on from kind of why manufacturing matters, and in particular which manufacturing matters, we want to say the particular industries that Howard discussed, and also these particular firms, regardless of industries, that are using these hybrid techniques. So how do we get there? So we think manufacturing policy should address 4 major challenges. We might think of these as market failures in economist speak. So we want to support R&D, need to improve access to finance, need lifelong training of workers, and finally, strategic investments with high returns to workers and communities. We want to illustrate how this can happen, not that we need to slavishly imitate anybody, but Germany is one of a number of countries that has shown the way that you can actually compete in manufacturing with high wages. So our lunch is being eaten not just by China, but by high-wage countries like Germany. So Germany pays significantly higher wages, as the chart shows, yet also has double the percentage of its workforce in manufacturing compared to the U.S. So how does Germany do it? So there's linked policies, complementary. I think there's been a discussion now in Washington. People have learned the word Fraunhofer, which is a set of very valuable institutes that help kind of cross the boundary from getting innovation out of the lab and into the shop floor at scale to be produced. But part of the reason this works is because it's linked with several other pieces of policy. So a second one is vocational training, where people, the reason that these innovations are able to be implemented is that there's a highly skilled workforce that can handle different ideas and change on the shop floor. So one of the policies that links the Fraunhofer with the vocational training is a program that allows or subsidizes the presence of PhD students on the shop floor in medium-sized companies. So they can take the information from the Fraunhofer Institute to the firm. Why is it even interesting for a PhD student to be in these firms? Well, because they're going to be surrounded by people with other kinds of skills. So in 2008, almost 60% of the entrants to the German labor force had an apprenticeship. So this is not just in manufacturing, this is overall. Plus, on top of that, 75% of German workers have the right to spend 5 days every year in continuous improvement. They have 5 days that they can spend in learning to improve themselves on their job. A third thing is stable access to finance. Some issues with this system now, but what it has provided in the past and currently provides better than the current U.S. system is there's a combination of a house bank system where you have specialized banks that know about manufacturing, how to value assets, and also knows the particular manufacturers that they're lending to. And then this is added to by some government funding, both national and province level. Finally is sturdy worker protections. And So workers are typically unionized in Germany, and these unions have a role in making decisions about production and investment as well. And I think this, in general, this topic of worker protections is really important. And if you think about the first three of these, you can think about these as kind of paving the high road, generating these investments that are subject in many ways to these externalities where individual firms don't make them because they're not capturing them. This last one you can think of as blocking the low road. And I think it's important for a couple reasons. One is, I think, as a nation, we have a national goal of rebuilding the middle class. And second, it's also important for keeping this innovation machine going, to make sure that firms profit by investing in innovation rather than by figuring out ways to use ever lower skilled workers. So together, these policies then provide both the incentive and the capability for firms to adopt these high road solutions that strengthen long-term competitiveness. What we think is kind of as a result of our research, and we discuss in the paper, is that U.S. manufacturing should do the following things. It should promote high road production. It should operate at multiple levels. So the entire economy, the industry, the firm, federal, state, and local. And promote this shared responsibility and also shared gains among employers, workers, unions, and government. And so to conclude our answer about why does manufacturing matter, we think that manufacturing matters to the extent that it serves important national goals. Already, the manufacturing that we have today pays higher wages than average, innovates more, contributes to reducing the trade deficit, contributes to our participation, our generation of a clean economy. We think that policy should maximize the extent to which manufacturing does that. And so we need not just sort of generic policies, but also specific policies specifically for manufacturing that promote coordinated investment. So if we think about this clean energy or lightweight materials issue, we need some coordination, that if I invest as a small tooling company in learning how to make tools that work with high-strength steel, that there's going to be a demand for those things. And this kind of coordinated investment needs to help things like continuous improvement, the incremental innovation. It needs to help with new technologies. It needs to help with developing a clean economy. Okay. So that's our presentation. I guess I'm supposed to encourage you all to tweet if you would like. And we also have some, some time for questions. So if people would like to ask questions, we have about 10 minutes. If you can state your name and affiliation. And probably what we'll do is collect a few questions and answer them as a group. Okay. Any questions? Good.
Cliff Waldman from, I'm sorry, thank you. Cliff Waldman from MAPOD, Manufacturers Alliance for Productivity and Innovation. I want to ask a question about what I have read and perceived to be a weakness even in the novel innovation ecosystem, and that is the supposedly difficulties in the relationship between universities and industry. You often hear that in the United States, with major research universities, there's a lot of friction in developing intellectual property relationships, and this is one of many things that's causing offshoring of R&D. Universities in Asia are better informing those kinds of relationships, better cooperation. Can you comment on that?
Great. Let's take a few more. I think, is it Tim? Do you want to go ahead? Well, I think we have a limited time. We'll just take 2 or 3 questions.
I'd just like to hear more about the idea. You all hammer a lot on the wage differential, but you did mention earlier that that's been diminishing in these last couple of years. Where do you see that going? And at some point, if the current trends continue, does manufacturing lose that element of its advantage as an economic sector?
And I guess maybe Bob and you. So I guess I think those two will have to be there. So thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, Bob Baugh from the AFL-CIO Industrial Union Council. I just want to thank you. I think your paper is terrific and is a really needed contribution. I guess my question or comment related to it is that it's really striking that you've shown sort of the myths about American manufacturing and at the same time have highlighted another country that actually has a strategy. And I guess I'd like to comment more on that it seems to me that most of the rest of the world actually has strategies around having manufacturing, and what you're pointing out is the failure of this country to have one at all. And I'd like to have that. I think the German example provides some context for that.
Karen Fireman, Naval Sea Systems Command. I look at what you have here. You have a lot of policymakers, very innovative thinkers. I like what you've said. I want to consider, have you consider the defense industrial base and to consider how do we change the paradigm. We're in a situation of a shrinking budget, which I consider a huge opportunity to change the rules. By changing the rules, I mean these innovative, agile companies won't even consider being part of the contracting nightmare and bureaucracy that we enforce on companies, and where we totally reward the ones that, as you pointed out, push down and squeeze the lower ones as opposed to becoming more innovative. So I'm looking forward to seeing from you all, how do we change that paradigm? How do we change the rules, requirements, overhead rules, contracting rules, the whole horse blanket we could get rid of, and FICM and R&D rules and qualifications and testing.
Great. We need to,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we need to move on, but
Well,
let Howard answer.
Let me
answer,
take at least
yeah.
the first couple of questions. So the first questioner is quite right that the incentives facing universities are not, in this country, are not conducive, not maximally conducive to pushing intellectual property out into the marketplace. Universities, to too great an extent, have an incentive to use IP licensing to maximize revenues. Other countries do better at that. On the other hand, there are some competitor countries that do much worse at that. China and some other low-wage countries have basically no intellectual property protections worth their salt. So whether that problem contributes to offshoring is a somewhat difficult question to answer. On wages, yes, we're very concerned about the recent declines in manufacturing wages, and yes, that could erode the overall manufacturing wage advantage. It probably won't erode it completely. There are reasons to think that manufacturing will still offer a wage premium. Manufacturing is still more capital intensive. Manufacturers need skilled and motivated workers to keep that equipment running optimally, and they're always going to be willing to pay a premium to get those kinds of workers. Manufacturing factories are still larger on average than other kinds of establishments, and so you can't hire enough managers to keep an eye on all the workers. In a large establishment, to some extent, workers have to manage themselves, and manufacturers will pay a premium to get the kinds of workers who will be able to do that. So I don't think that will completely dissipate the manufacturing wage advantage, but it could be reduced, and that's a big concern.
Yeah, maybe just thinking on just another approach on the wage differential question. I think one of the things that's an increasingly important part of pay packages is benefits, and it's a little hard to sort of figure out how to value them. There's some work being done in the Commerce Department that suggests that if you actually include benefits in the differential rate of benefits offered by manufacturers compared to non-manufacturers, that manufacturing wage differential is either non-existent or even reversed. So it's I think an open question. But clearly I think it's something that we need to work on, and basically maybe segue into answering this question about the strategy. I mean, I think what a strategy means is that you have coordinated investments where you kind of think through for example, how you're going to create both a supply and a demand for a novel product or a trained worker. If you have, think about a worker that might decide they want to invest in training to learn how to operate computer-controlled machinery. Well, if there's no such machinery in use, then that investment doesn't make sense. Similar, if you're a manufacturer, you're not going to invest in that machinery if you can't find a worker. So I think that's a kind of reason why we need a strategy, and that will help us build these shared assets that Peter mentioned. And so shared assets in the form of a skilled pool of workers through apprenticeships, a shared pool of suppliers that understand the implicit meaning of different kinds of specifications, that understand how to work with different forms of materials. These are very important. And I think it's not just, and to say that we want a strategy for manufacturing doesn't mean, we don't also want a strategy, say, for healthcare. I mean, some of these same issues around investing in new technology and getting workers trained exist in healthcare, exist in service industries. A last point then, I think, on this military industrial base and the contracting nightmare, I think it's not just limited to the military. I mean, I think one of the big issues in the auto industry, in fact, was their failure to adopt some of the supply chain policies adopted by Toyota and Honda, of thinking long-term about suppliers, et cetera. And I hope we have kind of an opportunity to restart. We've seen some of that. It's a combination, I think, of some financial issues that cause short-term thinking, some incentive issues within firms, some of the investments they've made in systems that help them work with such suppliers, these low-wage small suppliers, as opposed to, and don't really give them the benefits of working with these more skilled suppliers. It's a complex question, and I think a very important one.
So we turn now to the next part of our program, a moderated panel discussion. The discussion is moderated by Rob Atkinson. Rob is the founder and president of the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation and a prominent policy analyst and advocate on manufacturing and innovation issues. Rob.
While everybody's getting mic'd up here, let me start. First of all, let me thank Brookings for this really great papers and great event. This is an incredibly timely and important topic. We're going to be hearing sort of very briefly and somewhat more in a dialogue format today from four great speakers who are issuing or presenting four reports from the Connect Innovation Institute. The reports are out there. If you haven't seen them, I really encourage you to take a look at them. But before, let me introduce all our four speakers. I'll make a couple of quick remarks, and then we'll just jump right in. So on my immediate left is Danny Bresnitz, and Danny is an associate professor at Georgia Tech's Institute in Sam Nunn School of International Affairs, and I think I've read every book you've written, so I'm like a groupie. His first book, and by the way, these are all excellent books. I encourage you to read them. His first book was Innovation in the State, Political Choice and Strategies for Growth in Israel, Taiwan, and Ireland, and a very deep analysis of what these countries were doing in innovation policy. And his most recent book, which I think just came out last year, The Run of the Red Queen, Government Innovation, Globalization, and Economic Growth in China, is a very perceptive analysis of the Chinese innovation policy system. And I'm looking forward to his new book, which hopefully he'll send me for free, since I've said such.
Now you'll get 2 copies.
There you go. His new book with our colleague John Zeisman, Can Wealthy Nations Stay Rich, which was an Oxford Press. And like pretty much everybody on this panel, Danny got his PhD at MIT. This is the almost all MIT panel here. Next is Liz Reynolds. Liz is the Executive Director of MIT's Industrial Performance Center, which is an interdisciplinary research center looking at the nexus of innovation, productivity, and competitiveness. Her recent work focuses on energy innovation in the U.S. and also advanced manufacturing. Before doing that, Liz was the director of the city advisory practice for the Initiative for the Competitive Inner City, and she's also a member of the MIT Commission on Productivity and the Innovation Economy. And she also has a PhD from MIT. Let's see, Erica Fuchs is, there we go, is an assistant professor in the Department of Engineering and Public Policy at Carnegie Mellon University, and I think is our only real scientist or engineer on the panel, which I really enjoy and respect Erica's work because she brings this combination of deep knowledge of actual engineering to public policy, which, at least for me, I kind of make up a lot of stuff and have to rely on Erica's work. So her work has been published in a number of prestigious journals: High Temperature Materials and Processes, Journal of Lightwave Technology, Composite Science and Technology, and International Journal of Production Economics, etc. And she has her PhD at MIT as well. I detect a pattern here. And last is Josh Whitford, who doesn't have his PhD at MIT, but unfortunately only has a PhD from University of Wisconsin, so we'll let that go.
Yeah, flyover land. Somebody's got to come from flyover land,
Somebody's
right?
got to do that. I understand the industrial Midwest.
Absolutely.
Josh is an associate professor of sociology at Columbia and a faculty affiliate of the Center for Organizational Innovation. He's also the author of a book, The New Old Economy, about the implications of outsourcing for industrial policy in the U.S. Also a book, When Networks Fail, a book on the general theory of network failure. Actually, that's a forthcoming book. And Icons on the Edge, a book about the prospects and implications of the Fiat-Chrysler merger. So before I start, we heard from Howard about the op-ed by Christina Romer. If you haven't read it, it's worth looking at for only really one reason: to understand how deeply embedded the neoclassical ideology is in Washington. This is essentially a view that says manufacturing is no different than massage parlors. They're just all industries. And it sort of harkens back to the days of Michael Boskin, for those of you old enough to remember this. And the Clinton-Bush campaign in '92, Michael Boskin famously said when he was chief economic advisor for President George W. Bush, "Potato chips, computer chips, what's the difference?" So I'm here today to make a bold statement. There is a fundamental difference between these two things. When this improves and cuts in cost by half every 18 months, we get fat. And when this does it, we get rich. So that's the difference. That's why we care about this stuff. So on that note, let me start with Danny. Danny, I think one of the lessons, one of the things we always hear about, why do we worry about this stuff? Because we're good at innovation in this country. We recently had an event on manufacturing policy, and somebody came up to me beforehand and said, what are you guys doing on manufacturing? I thought you guys were about innovation. And I'm like, well, innovation is in manufacturing too. And there's sort of this deep view that sort of this innovation thing, and then there's this manufacturing thing. And I think what's important about your work, and including in this new report, is you talk about that we really have two systems and that our process innovation or incremental innovation system is not anywhere near as good as it should be. Can you say a little bit more about what you found and why you think that?
Sure. So first of all, thanks, Brookings, and thanks everybody for being here. And thanks my panelists for joining me on this venture. And yes, we care about innovation, and I think both of us and everybody here, because of its impact on economic growth. In order for innovation to help economic growth, we can't stop just in the act of inventing. We actually have to come with products and services and continuously improve them and make them cheaper. That's where innovation have its true impact on economic growth. And that's also where new industries, new companies come to a fore and employ people, where we just heard, with higher wages. In this country, as Peter has said, we are really, really good in novel product innovation. Yes, we should tweak it, but we should also remember we are the best in the world. And we have a whole system that supports us to stay the best in the world. Well, we used to be the best in the world, and now we definitely are not, is in everything that happens after the invention and maybe the first product. And Liz will also talk about this and scaling up. And as Erica will say, and Josh will say, this fact also impacts our ability to invent and innovate. The fact that we are no longer good in incremental and production innovation. Make it more difficult for us to come with new products because we need those skills and those capacities. Also, I would like to say one thing that is important when the policy orientation is that the world has changed. Our theories, and especially the way we think about policies, have not. One of the major changes of the new so-called globalization is we have fragmented production. If I've seen iPad in the crowd, the iPad is invented in California and manufactured by basically gazillion of companies all over the world. We think about China, but even the glass is an American company. Therefore, in order to make an iPad, even be able to produce it, we have to think about the whole network of companies and innovation that have to come together, sometimes extremely quickly, within 3 months, to enable a company, Apple, to actually come with a new product. Unfortunately, most of the way we still think about companies, one company. Instead of understanding that if we really want to compete, we have to think about subset of companies. We can call them networks, we can call them ecosystem, but we have to move them together, otherwise we won't be able to come with new products. That also leads to one other part of innovation which we have to think about it. We have a lot of rules for invention because we agree that it's basically a semi-public good. Therefore, private companies will not invest enough in it. This is also true in every other kind of innovation. And therefore, we should think about shared assets. We should think about things like a Fraunhofer, with if you really think what it does, it's basically provide the semi-public goods of those kind of innovation to those small and medium-sized enterprises so they can become more and more profitable and better. And this is, of course, one of the examples we love in this country is training and labor force. And I just have to remark that one of the things we have to think about once you move to this new policy paradigm is that our labor training program usually look backward. If you look at Taiwan, which I know very well, if you even look at China, and definitely in Germany, they are future-looking board. What kind of workers do we need 10 years from now? Not what kind of workers we needed 10 years ago. The last thing that I want to say to open this panel is to repeat the fact that we have extremely good financial investment organization, ideas, system to support novel product innovation. We invented the venture capital industry. We used to have a system that also was able to have the skills and the capacity and the business models to invest in production facilities and incremental and process innovation. We don't have it. I don't know how many of you remember, maybe your parents, maybe yourself, walking around with a credit card that says Chemical Bank. It's now Chase. And it lost a lot of what chemical banks knew about the chemical industry. And with that, I think I'll stop and let my fellow
Danny, let me ask you one quick follow-on, which is one of the points you make in the paper, which I think is incredibly important, which is that the unit of intervention should not just be the firm, it should be the industry or the sector. Isn't that industrial policy?
That's an interesting question because I'm not sure what is not an industrial policy if you take this seriously. I would say that if we care, which I think we should, about innovation and economic growth in this country, we have to realize that the way we produce both services and products, most of them, by the way, are the same thing or combined together, and we want to excel, we have to think about coordination problems among many different companies, especially since coordination problems, semi-public goods, and collective action are things that we know companies have difficult to overcome. And the other thing is most other countries that I work with, including countries that are really good in novel product innovation like Israel, have realized that, and they are changing their policies. Maybe we should look around and see whether that's a smart thing to do.
Great, great. So, Liz, that's actually a setup maybe for you now, in the sense of you're looking in your study at one particular kind of industry, and that it has unique characteristics, in part that suggest perhaps some future growth in the U.S. So maybe you could say a little bit about more of that, and also with the view of that we have to think about industries in a different way, that they're not all alike, and they don't all need the same policy, if you will.
Right. Well, it's useful to follow Danny, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the biomanufacturing industry, which is an excellent case study and a window into the type of advanced manufacturing where I think the U.S. has real strength. And at the same time, we see some dynamics going on that I think are worrisome for us long term. So biomanufacturing is a very complex type of manufacturing. It doesn't necessarily bring about thoughts about the shop floor. We're trying to scale living organisms, and that's really difficult. And as a result, it's the kind of technology that involves R&D, but also M. So research and development is happening here, and the U.S. is the leader in the world in this. But at the same time, we have to have the manufacturing very close and in great proximity to this, so that we can scale this very complex process. As a result, after pioneering this industry, the U.S. has become the leader and dominant in terms of biomanufacturing capacity in all the world. 5 of the top 10 locations globally for biomanufacturing are here in the U.S., and that is because we have historically done the pilot manufacturing, the clinical manufacturing, and the commercial manufacturing here, because it was an important process for us to scale and get right. Fast forward 25 years, and what's happened, like has happened in many industries, is we've become more productive, and processes have become more standardized. The standardization has meant that there's ability to move this production offshore, particularly to countries